after last week's entire debacle, I never thought that I would utter these words, but yeah, EA Sports got it right. They did a really good job with the top 100 player rankings, which is even more baffling to think of when talking about the defensive and offensive rankings now, because they seem to have a good understanding about where players reside. Now, not everything was perfect, and there were some players a little too high, some players a little too low. But at the end of the day, you can't really argue with the results. And that's what we're here to talk about, especially when it comes to SEC players. So what's going on, SEC Unfiltered? It's Thompson here. Make sure that you like the video, hit the ring notification. That way you don't miss a single episode, because we're talking college football, including the video game, leading up to SEC Media Days and throughout the chaotic 2024 season. Download the podcast version of the show wherever you get your podcast listening systems. Make sure that you are subscribed on all social platforms: TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, at SEC Unfiltered. You want to scream and yell at me, it's at Mr. Cole Thompson on YouTube and on Twitter. And to keep up with the number one source for your favorite team, especially throughout 2024, visit SECUnfiltered.com. This episode is brought to you by RHOBACK. Use promo code SECU for 20% off all joggers, polos, hoodies, shorts. Look good, feel good this upcoming fall with RHOBACK, 20% off SECU. So the top 100 rankings, let's go through it from a top 10 just nationally. Will Johnson, the cornerback out of Michigan. Will Campbell comes in at number 2 from LSU. Ollie Gordon, the running back, Doak Walker Award winner from Oklahoma State. He's been the subject of Big 12 Media Days, comes in at 3. James Pierce comes in at 4 from the University of Tennessee. Caleb Downs comes in at number 5. Should be at Alabama, but he's not. Travis Hunter comes in at number 6. They have him listed as a wide receiver, which I'm going to find really interesting to see how that goes in the game. Malachi Starks is at number 7. You have Mason Graham at number 8 from Michigan. Quinshon Judkins, another SEC player, is at number 9. And Tate Rutledge, the offensive lineman, is the second highest player in the trenches from the SEC, rounding out the top 10. Now, let's talk about the SEC rankings just in general. For starters, they got the number 1 pick right. I have made this abundantly clear on this show. I have made it clear on every show. You allow me to build my roster in the SEC. I'm taking Will Campbell and I'm running away with it. I know that there are good pass rushers in the conference. I know that there are great defensive backs in the conference. I know that there's good quarterback play. I know there's solid wide receivers. There are not many offensive linemen built like the 6'5" phenom that resides in Baton Rouge and has been crushing it at left tackle. That is a program-defining builder, and it is good that he is getting the top ranking among SEC players. There's no argument for me on that one. The argument actually would have been, does Caleb Downs, if he stays at Alabama, now working in Kane Woolmick's system, does he potentially take over as the number 1 spot? But with him at Ohio State, yeah, I got no concerns. None whatsoever. It absolutely makes sense. James Pierce at number 2 makes total sense as well. Guy is the number 1 pass rusher returning to Knoxville. He's the number 1 pass rusher in the SEC this upcoming season. Many people believe that if the draft were to be tomorrow, the kid from the Volunteer State would be the prime example of a Myles Garrett 2.0 and going number 1 overall. Nobody would doubt that. Tennessee has a very good, solid defensive line, and it's headlined by James Pierce Jr. Makes total sense. Let's talk about Luther Burden, who's the first name off of that list. Burden, without question, is the number 1 wide receiver in the conference. Anybody who wants to argue with that, go ahead and start talking to a tree, because that is the type of responses you're going to get. There is really an argument to say that it's him and maybe T-Mac out of Arizona as 1A, 1B wide receivers in the country. And even then, you could say, well, the competition that Luther Burden goes up against completely differs than what McMillan saw last year and what he is going to see this upcoming year in the Big 12. So no doubt whatsoever, he'd be my number 1 receiver, which is why I think it's interesting that Travis Hunter got ranked ahead of him. Because Hunter, in my opinion, if you continue with the dual threat aspect, he probably has more of a case to be in the top 3 than he does actually at number 8 or number 7. But when you have now Luther Burden on the outside, he's a much more fluid route runner. He's better with the catch radius. He has stronger hands. He's more fluid when it comes in and out of breaks. He's a bigger red zone target. I actually would say that he is an upgrade at wide receiver over a guy like Travis Hunter. But then that would be counteractive because of when you would say actually Travis Hunter is a better corner than he is wide receiver. Regardless, it has nothing to do with Travis Hunter. Here I am going on a rant about Colorado players when I just did a rant saying that Colorado players weren't there. I do have a problem with Luther Burden not being in the top 10, but I don't have a problem with him being behind guys like James Pierce, Malachi Stark, and Tate Ratledge. Carson Beck is the number 1 quarterback. He comes in at number 18. I feel like that's a common ground. The guy last year did not miss. He was consistently finding ways to pull his team to victory. And when he had a mistake, it was one blundering moment that outside of the Alabama game didn't cost him. He had an average showcase against Florida at the very beginning, didn't cost him. Had an average showcase at the very beginning against Auburn, didn't cost him. Had an average showcase throughout the day, in my opinion, against Mizzou, didn't cost him. And so him at 18 makes total sense. It's the number 1 quarterback when it comes to the SEC. I believe I'm not mistaken. He is the number 1 quarterback also in, no, my bad. He is tied for number 1 with Shedeur Sanders, both coming in at a 93. After that, let's go ahead and talk about a few snubs that I have. For starters, why is Nick Scorton at 88? Honestly, like, why is Nick Scorton that low? Does anybody remember what he did last year before he arrived in College Station? So Scorton was the number 1 player in the Big Ten on defense. Oh, no. That's not me saying it. That's not an A&M alum saying it. No, that's the Big Ten saying it. Because at Purdue last year, he won the Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year. He led the team in tackles for losses. He led the conference in sacks. He was everywhere. And so far, when you hear the news of him coming out of College Station underneath Mike Elko, who is a whiz of getting quality play from defensive linemen. In fact, he's a big reason why most of the players over the last few years have gone to the NFL. He's going to be a plug-and-play addition and an immediate starter, so I don't even think that that's a problem. 88, like, cool. It's a 91 ranking, which I think is totally fine, but 88 overall, why? Why? No, this guy, in my opinion, is the number 2 pass rusher in the SEC. And on top of that, he absolutely belongs somewhere in the top 25. I would say he's probably closer to Deion Walker and to Walter Nolan at 21 and 26 than he is anybody below him. I definitely would take him right now over Dylan Fairchild. I definitely would say that he's a better upgrade over Landon Jackson. I would say that he's probably better than Maxwell Hairston. I would say you're probably going to put him in over Deontay Lawson. 88 is just a little too low for my liking. I'm not a big fan of it. And the same thing goes for Emory Jones, who comes in at number 92. Emory Jones, in my opinion, is a top 10 offensive tackle in the country. Now, does it help that he plays on the right side and everyone talks about the left side being bigger in college football? Certainly, but that's also an old way of thinking. People don't want to go ahead and pinpoint that in the NFL these days, it doesn't matter if you're good at one aspect or you're lesser at another, and so we're just going to throw you on the other side of the line because we just got to fill bodies. The great teams have exceptional players in both pass pro and run blocking for their trenches. And you know what Emory Jones did last year? Well, for those of you that kind of forgot, he helped a Heisman Trophy winner set records in the conference where he rushed for over 1,500 yards, led the team in yards after contact, and they had one of the most potent run games, and he was never tackled behind the line of scrimmage. Will Campbell gets a lot of that praise because he's been a great left tackle, but Emory Jones deserves the exact same amount of respect, which is why he should be probably somewhere in the top 65. I can understand that he's not at Campbell's level, and then you got a lot of skill players in there. But at the same moment, I think that you've got to give a little bit more praise to a guy like Emory Jones for what he's done. I don't really have a problem with the defensive linemen, guys like Walter Nolan and Deion Walker being next to each other, one at 21, one at 26. One's been a much more proven commodity at a lesser tier school. The other one, I think, has more upside, now going to be a part of Pete Golding's defense. And he never really flourished to the level of what we thought he was going to underneath DJ Durkin. But just because you haven't got there doesn't mean you can't. So I do think that there is a lot of positivity with this new formation. And both these guys can be immediate risers. Walker, in my opinion, is the best interior defensive lineman in the conference. And Walter Nolan's not that far behind. Quinn Ewers ranked as the second best Texas player. No problem with that. None whatsoever. Because of, yes, even though he was a stud last year in the Big 12, and a big reason why the Longhorns were able to beat up on Oklahoma, I mean, he made Big 12 conference championship history. Like, that's a record that he can take with him to the grave. But having a stable offensive line was a big reason why this team got to where it was. Having a stable defensive line was a big reason to why this team got to where it was. Ewers was the biggest component to this roster, but he wasn't the only component. Devondre Sweat, Byron Murphy, and certainly Kelvin Banks, who is the number 2 offensive tackle in the SEC, and I have no problem with it whatsoever. Guy would have been a plug-and-play addition for all 134 offensive lines across the country at the FBS level. So don't think just because he hasn't gone up against SEC competition means he can't go and be that difference maker. He's a first-round bona fide talent. When looking at wide receivers, you got your second player coming in at 81 with Trey Harris, and honestly, I'm okay with that. I am. I think Trey Harris going into this year belongs in that conversation of being wide receiver 2B or wide receiver 2A. You can probably throw in a few names that haven't hit their stride just yet. Jeremy Bernard, Cam Coleman out of Auburn. I would probably say you want to throw in a Deion Burks. If you haven't bought stock in him, sorry, hate to break it to you. It's already too late to go ahead and buy in. But I do think that Harris, who last season was a big factor and a security blanket at times for Jackson Dart, is going to be a household name this upcoming season. Some snubs that I didn't really notice. Marcus Carroll, the running back out of Georgia State, who now is going to be a stud for the Missouri Tigers, was not listed. But to be fair, no running back, in my opinion, was listed. You go through the list, you don't have any in the top in the top 80. You go to page 2, which if you just go ahead and look on EA Sports, you can find it. You don't have a single one anywhere, so it doesn't really make it that bad. But I do feel like Marcus Carroll, who last year was a top 10 running back in college football, and they did credit some other group of 5 players, guys like Caden Salters and Jamarca Cooley out of Liberty, both at the 99 and 100 spot. I understand that reasoning, but I feel like that what a guy like Carroll does is provide exceptional value. And again, you have it kind of be an open race. No Jonathan Brooks, no Quinshon Judkins, because if he transferred, maybe Carroll's a little too high for my liking. Maybe I'm just a little bit higher on him, but it does make me wonder what was the reasoning that they didn't mention a running back. Another snub that I think is really interesting, no Brady Cook. Now, I'm not going to say Brady Cook is a top 5 quarterback, top 3 quarterback in the SEC. I won't go that far. I know that there are people out there that are saying that Cook is going to cook this year, and he could. But it also helps to have a very stable offensive line with guys like Caden Green and Marcus Bryant coming on over, having the same offensive identity with Kirby Moore still as your play caller, a security blanket in Luther Burden, a quality number 2 weapon, a really good number 3 weapon that we don't talk about enough in Mookie Cooper. I still feel like he is a top 100 player. Now, that's just me saying that maybe you want to throw him in at the back end at number 10. I feel like that with Caden Salter, you try to go ahead and be a little bit more various when it came to your rankings. But I would have had him in my top 100. I definitely would have thought he was probably going to fall somewhere near the end of the pecking order. One more for you. Alabama, I do think is really interesting that they have the second most players on this list. So Ohio State comes in with the most at 8. But if Caleb Downs didn't transfer and he stayed in Tuscaloosa, they would have been tied with the Buckeyes at 7. And their entire interior offensive line is listed. So many people have questions when it comes to what Alabama is going to be this upcoming season, because if it's a brand new offensive identity, it's a brand new defense. Well, what EA Sports is telling you is that they still have the quarterback in Jalen Milroe. They still have a solid, sturdy offensive line headlined by newcomer Parker Brailsford. They also still have Tyler Booker. They also still have Jaden Roberts. They have a good linebacking room headlined by Deontay Lawson. They still have a good secondary headlined by Malachi Moore. And they still have players. So Alabama, even though there's a lot of people who are ready to go ahead and say the dynasty is over, it's time to call it quits. Well, don't be surprised when December rolls around and lo and behold, the mask is untaken off. And there we are. It's the Crimson Tide sitting on top and saying, hello, we're right back. Because you want to know why? We got a winner as a coach and we have absolutely consistent play. The final thing I want to touch on real fast that is really important moving forward. EA Sports did something that the other company didn't. No 99s. You got to earn it. And you want to know why I appreciate that? Because if I am a big Will Johnson fan, I think I've made this clear on the show. I do believe that Will Johnson is the best cornerback in college football. I am a big Luther Burden fan. I am a big Will Campbell fan. I'm a huge Caleb Downs fan. I love Travis Hunter. I love Malachi Starks. They're all exceptional players, and they're difference makers. But to get the 99, the NFL with Madden hands it out like candy. Just, oh, you had a good play one week. Here you go, 99 from a 97. Everyone's at a 96 or lower. that gives you room to grow, to make history, to be a part of a special look in the future of this sport. And ultimately, that's the end goal for me. Can you continuously see growth and progress? Because if so, well, then I think that you're in a really good spot moving forward. Maybe that's what we will see moving with this game, where you will get to see players elevate their status. And 96 becomes a 98, and a 94 becomes a 99, and then a 91 eventually wins the Heisman Trophy. And then there he is at 99. Leave it for the legends. It's a good move of what EA Sports did. But let me know in the comment section down below who was ranked too high, who was ranked too low in the SEC, who were some players that you want to see in the next 100 list, who are some players that you think are going to be egregiously underrated when it all is said and done. Let me also make sure that you follow us on social media, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, at SEC Unfiltered. You want to scream and yell at me, it's at Mr. Cole Thompson on Twitter. And make sure to keep up with the #1 content. You're visiting SECUnfiltered.com. I'm Cole Thompson. The game is right around the corner. Until next time, folks, later.